The Conservatives win German election as far right comes second with record result. Friedrich Merz Conservatives have won Germany's national election while the far right surged to second place. The provisional results indicate the Alternative for Germany is heading for the strongest showing for a far right party since the Second World War. Also on the programme tonight, Russia does not hold all the cards. The Prime Minister tells the world leaders at Ukraine summit on the anniversary of the war. Sir Keir Starmer has told world leaders in Kyiv that Russia does not hold all the cards in the war with Ukraine, as he announced as a raft of sweeping sanctions to put economic pressure on Vladimir Putin. Boris Johnson says minerals deal is very close between America and Ukraine. The former Prime Minister spoke from Kyiv and predicted there would be a deal in the next couple of days between the US and Ukraine over mineral rights. And Pope Francis awake and resting after kidney problem found, say petition. Pope Francis is awake and resting in hospital, the petition said, as he continues to battle a lung infection that has provoked the early stages of kidney insufficiency. The 88-year-old is in good spirits and is continuing to feed himself, the statement added.
This is STV News at 6:30 with Stephen Woolridge and Mary Nightingale.
Good evening. The Friedrich Merz Conservatives have won Germany's national election, while the far right surged to second place. The provisional results indicate that the Alternative for Germany is heading for the strongest showing for a far right party since the Second World War. Meanwhile, current Chancellor Olaf Scholz centre-left Social Democrats are on track for their worst post-war result in a national parliamentary election. But the Conservatives have claimed victory in the German election, but far-right AfD celebrated record results, as our STV News Europe editor James Mates reports.
It wasn't the triumph they were hoping for, but it was a clear win. At the Christian Democrat headquarters, that was enough for tonight. Actually forming a coalition strong enough to govern may be a whole new battle. Friedrich Merz will be Germany's new Chancellor and knows the international situation demands urgency.
Die Welt da draußen wartet nicht auf uns.
The world out there isn't waiting for us, he told supporters, and it isn't waiting for long, drawn-out coalition talks and negotiations. The situation is complicated by the far-right AfD, led by Alice Weidel, winning 1 in 5 votes, their best ever performance by a long way. If they were a normal party, a strong second place would give them a say in coalition building, but that's not going to happen.
There will be no coalition with the AfD. The AfD is pro-Putin, anti-NATO, anti-EU. They are questioning the fundamentals of the Federal Republic of Germany. We will never work together with these kind of people.
That means the party of outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz, despite a humiliation tonight, will have to stay in government as a junior partner. But it all might take Friedrich Merz a long time to sort out.
He's going to have to be a strong leader, not just for Germany, but for Europe. But as ever with Germany, you're going to have to form coalitions, and that's not going to be too easy.
Is it going to be quick?
He wants it to be quick. He has made it clear that with the twin threats of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, he wants to get a new government going quickly.
Back at the Christian Democrat Victory Party, there was optimism that Germany may soon be back to centre stage.
Europe really needs Friedrich Merz to be a strong leader.
Yes.
Is that going to happen?
I hope so. I sure hope so.
What does your gut tell you?
Yes, he will be. It's going to be difficult. We have Putin on the one side in Russia, we have Trump on the other side in the US.
But lurking in the background will be the fear that if this German government doesn't get it right, the far-right AfD will be ready and waiting for their next chance. Friedrich Merz has waited a long time for his chance to lead. It could hardly have come at a more difficult moment.
Now, James, what do you think that this means now for Europe's efforts to present a united front against President Trump?
Well, in the short term, it is far from ideal because while this coalition building goes on, the outgoing Chancellor Olaf Scholz will remain in charge as the lamest of lame ducks, and that's why while next week President Macron of France and Keir Starmer go to Washington to present Europe's point of view to Donald Trump, and they would dearly love a German voice, if not a German presence there. There's also due to be an emergency European summit in 10 days' time on this transatlantic crisis, and it's not clear the new man will be there either. But Friedrich Merz, longer term, has laid out tonight in TV interview that a priority of his will be to ensure Europe can achieve full strategic independence from the US. Now, that, of course, is a line that President Macron has been pushing for a long time, but for a German leader, an Atlanticist like Merz, a long-term supporter of NATO, to be talking like this, German policy longer term is clearly going to be very different.
Next this evening, Sir Keir Starmer has told world leaders in Kyiv that Russia does not hold all the cards in the war with Ukraine, as he announced a raft of sweeping sanctions to put economic pressure on Vladimir Putin. In a show of support for Ukraine, leaders from Europe and Canada, including European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, are attending a summit led by Volodymyr Zelensky to mark their third anniversary of Russia's invasion. During the summit, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky also said he was ready to resign if it meant peace in his country, suggesting he would swap it for NATO membership.
Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson tells this programme there is a deal to be done over Ukraine, and now is the time for the UK to step up in negotiations with the US to end the war.
Yes, he was speaking here live just a few minutes ago, predicting that there will be a deal in the next couple of days between America and Ukraine over mineral rights, which effectively, he says, will put America back with skin in the game. Big game changer, he said. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, of course, has said that he'll step down from his job if it guarantees peace. A lot happening today. This week, Sir Keir Starmer heading to Washington. He goes on Thursday to meet the US President. And our chief correspondent, Richard Gaisford, is in Kyiv for us. Richard, good morning. It seems that everybody is beginning to weigh in on this matter this week. It's going to be one heck of a week, isn't it?
Oh, it most certainly is. There's a big diplomatic gathering here today in Kyiv. 13 world leaders sitting down with Volodymyr Zelensky for an emergency summit. They're standing shoulder to shoulder with him, not just against Vladimir Putin, but seemingly now increasingly against Donald Trump as well. Bit of a surprise to see Boris Johnson just walk past us here in the centre of Kyiv this morning. It's clear, having spoken to him, that he's not happy with Donald Trump's approach, but says there is a deal to be done with the US.
Who...
You've just got to keep knocking the ball back over the net. I mean, this is crazy stuff. But, you know, look at the... And I agree, it's Orwellian. But you've got to look at what is actually being proposed. And I think to a certain extent, there's deal-making going on, there's brinkmanship. Now is the moment for us to step up and do what I think that Trump wants Europe to do, and that is show how we have a plan to help secure Ukraine, and that's going to mean, I believe, UK troops are going to mean French troops, troops from other European countries.
Well, across the weekend, we've been in the trenches with troops who've been fighting for 3 years in the most challenging of conditions. Also with civilians in areas that have been so badly bomb hit, but they're hanging on. Meeting too with soldiers who've lost arms and legs and are desperate to get back to the front line. We've seen that resilience over the last 3 years building here in Ukraine, but the shape of the war has changed, and so much of that is to do with the threat of drones. Speeding across the Zaporizhzhia front, where drone attacks are an ever-present danger. This beeps when the drone comes overhead, and gives you time to hide, hopefully. It means soldiers have been driven underground in a maze of trenches and reinforced accommodation.
The trenches are actually still the best way to live a sort of normal life and unwind after you get back from the front line.
In a new normal, old traditions. Today is Moto's birthday, his colleagues waking him at midnight, with him later getting promotion to sergeant. Watching over nearby Russian positions, the company commander tells me that drones have changed the shape of the war over the last 3 years.
We're at the peak of the drone war. Our drones, the enemy's drones, they're monitoring everything 24/7. It's really difficult, almost impossible, for the infantry to actually get to the positions without being seen.
That's really amazing. Many of those being treated at the Titanovi Centre in Kyiv have been hit by attack drones. Here, the most severely injured are given pioneering prosthetic limbs connected into bones. That gives them a chance of a more normal life and rejoining the fight for Ukraine's survival.
For me, this is personal. The place where I was born and lived my whole life is occupied by the Russians. So I want to finish my rehab as soon as possible, so I can get back and help my unit, my people, my comrades and my country.
Bodies are being rebuilt, whilst homes across the country lie in ruins. Here in Orikhiv, a town in Zaporizhia, all but destroyed by Russian shelling, we visit with Lubov. Bombs fall daily. Her neighbours have fled. She and husband Yuri won't move though, having taken in all their abandoned pets.
The dogs and cats started coming to our place, so we'd give them some food. And we ended up with 15 cats, then 17 cats, then 20 cats. We couldn't just abandon them.
Everyone we've spoken to wants the killing to stop, but not if it means, after 3 years of fighting, conceding their land to Vladimir Putin. Richard Gaisford, Good Morning Britain, Zaporizhia.
Remarkable pictures there from our correspondent Richard Gaisford, reporting from the front line in Ukraine. Well, let's go to the political front line. Louisa James is our political correspondent in Downing Street. Very good morning to you, Louisa. Right, you're there at the home of the current Prime Minister. We've just spoken to a former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, who has always allied himself with Ukraine. He told us live on the programme this morning there is a deal to be done, partly over minerals in Ukraine with the United States, that that means to see UK troops on the ground in Ukraine. And he was also highly critical of the US president, saying that his comments about Vladimir Zelensky were Orwellian. Now, it's rather stolen the limelight, I would have thought, from the Prime Minister. Have you had a response from Downing Street?
No, not yet, but it is still early days, of course. Boris Johnson only just saying that on Good Morning Britain, but it does really prove what a tightrope Keir Starmer is going to have to walk on Thursday, doesn't it? And it is going to be a high-risk moment. Boris Johnson says it is also a moment of potentially high rewards, talking about it very positively, but you only have to look at the phone call that took place between Keir Starmer and France's President Emmanuel Macron, who goes out to the Oval Office today, to see the huge gap in opinion between the UK and its allies and President Trump. The two leaders spoke about the barbaric, full-scale invasion Russia carried out in Ukraine 3 years ago, talked about working together at a moment that is critical for global security. And of course, much of that is the exact opposite of what President Trump has been saying over the last week or so, that it is in fact Ukraine who started the war, and it is Zelensky, not Putin, who is the dictator. And of course, it is one thing disagreeing with President Trump in a carefully worded press release, and quite another saying it to his face. And it is fine for Boris Johnson to do that as a former Prime Minister, but as a current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer knows that he has to take his diplomatic mission very seriously and very carefully indeed. Boris Johnson described what President Trump has been saying as crazy and, as you say, Orwellian, but he did say to Keir Starmer that what he needs to do is go with an offer to President Trump of increased military support for Ukraine, including British troops. The big question, though, is what that is going to mean in terms of increased military spending here, because even a tiny increase in defence spending from 2.3% of national income, which it is at the moment, up to 2.5%, that's still half of what President Trump has said he wants, would cost billions of pounds a year, and that would have to come either from taxes taxes or increase government borrowing, both of which Keir Starmer has said he doesn't want to do, or decreases in public spending. The Conservatives say it should come from the foreign aid budget, but it looks as though welfare spending could be at the top of the list of cuts.
Still a go on the STV Evening News. Pope Francis is awake and resting in the hospital as he continues to battle a lung infection that has provoked the early stages of kidney insuffocation. We'll have that story when we come back after this break. See you in a minute. Welcome back. Pope Francis is awake and resting in hospital, the petitioner said, as he continues to battle a lung infection that has provoked the early stages of kidney insufficiency. The 88-year-old is in good spirits and is continuing to feed himself, the statement added. Doctors said late Sunday he was in critical condition, but he hadn't experienced any further respiratory crises since Saturday. But here's our reporter now on the 88-year-old has been monitored closely by doctors for more than a week.
What more do we know about the Pope's condition?
Morning, Ranveer. Well, so far, according to the Vatican, we know that he hasn't had any more further respiratory crises since Saturday. But as you say, he remains in a critical condition. He's been receiving blood transfusions, supplemental oxygen to help him. And according to the latest statement from the Vatican, blood tests have revealed that he is suffering kidney problems. But the Vatican had very much described this as mild problems and under control. Now, all of this has meant that he wasn't physically here for Mass on Sunday, celebrating it with people that were taking care of him at Gemelli Hospital. Now, millions around the world have been praying for his healing and for him to pull through. And on Sunday, his official social media account acknowledged this, sending a message worldwide telling people, thanking them for their closeness and their consolation. This morning, I've been speaking to tourists here who began their day rather early, but having spoken to them, there is certainly a deep sadness hanging in the Vatican air, doubt, uncertainty over what the future holds. But for so many, they are holding on to hope that Pope Francis, loved for his very human appeal and human touch that he had in his papacy, that he will pull through.
Wishing him well, and that is it from the both of us here this evening. We're both back with the news at 10 o'clock tonight. But from both of us here, have a very good evening to you. Good night. Good night.